The principle of polarity is related to the principle of vibration. This principle tells us that there are opposites within nature, as the Kybalion states, quote, "The great Fourth Hermetic Principle, the principle of polarity, embodies the truth that all things manifest have two sides, two aspects, two poles, a pair of opposites, with manifold degrees between the two extremes." This principle seems paradoxical, but there is a way to make sense of it and to derive it from modern physics. In this video, I hope to go over what makes the principle of polarity true. The principle of polarity tells us that these scales of vibration relate to corresponding scales of mental states, such that all the mental states on a scale are related to each other with poles existing at each extreme. All of the mental states on one scale are of course degrees of each other, varying between the extremes of the poles, as one would expect, given that it is nonsensical to speak of loudness coming from coldness or roundness coming from the color yellow. Quote, "When, however, the principle of polarity is once grasped, and it is seen that the mental changes are associated with a change of polarity, a sliding along the same scale, the matter is much more readily understood. The change is not so much in the nature of transmission of one thing into another thing entirely different, but it is merely a change of degree in the same things, a vastly important difference. For instance, borrowing an analogy, from the physical plane, it is impossible to change heat into sharpness, loudness, highness, etc., but heat may readily be transmitted into cold simply by lowering the vibrations. In the same way, hate and love are mutually transmutable, but so are fear and courage. But fear cannot be transformed into love, nor can courage be transformed into hate. The mental states belong to innumerable classes, each class of which has its polar opposites, along which transmission is possible. The Kybalion also relates the principle of polarity to two seemingly contradictory halves of paradoxes being ultimately resolvable. This is true too, as we will explore in this video. The physics behind the principle of polarity can be directly understood from the physics of vibration and mentalism. Specifically, all that is needed is the basic understanding of quantum waves described in our previous videos, as well as how quantum cognition relates mental states to entanglement. On conscious realism, the wave function is derived by the interactions of conscious agents. More conscious agents can be added to a wave function, thereby entangling them into a larger conscious agent. As entangled systems have a higher vibration than single systems, the vibration would increase as more conscious agents are added to the system. In turn, these would constitute larger or new larger conscious agents with new internal distinctive conscious states of their own. Thus, as a vibration increases, new conscious states appear. Something similar appears in quantum integrated information theory, or quantum PSI, is matters in turn of entangled information. As the entanglement is increased, new PSI states with more information are created with a subsequently greater degree of vibration. This approach has an additional issue of whether or not it is possible for quantum PSI to achieve a state greater than that of 25.4, though it is unsettled. If quantum PSI is a valid concept, the greater PSI to greater vibration correlation would collaborate to the production of new conscious states as well, replicating polarity. Finally, in the case of quantum cognition, it also derives in the same result independently. If each cognitive state is encoded in the wave function as explained before, then the wave function containing only that of cognitive states will have a vibration specific to that cognitive state. Changing that vibration will therefore necessarily correspond to a different conscious state. In quantum biology, it has given us a fascinating example of plurality in effective discovery of quantum smell. Here, different smells, which are sensations of the mind, have actually been shown by science to be the direct causal result of different quantum vibrations. For example, the fruit flies in Turing's experiments were able to smell this vibrational difference when these different molecules with different vibrational rates interacted directly with their central nervous system. This result has been popularly known as quantum smell in the press. And so given that this is the only factor involved in altering the smell from one smell to another, which was the molecule's quantum vibration, this presents direct scientific confirmation of the principle of polarity in modern experiments. Another thing related to polarity is in the Kybalion mentions the topic of mental induction. This principle shows us how it is possible for one person to influence the mental states of another through vibration. This can be seen in a statement here. Quote, "In addition to the changes of the poles of one's own mental states by operating in the art of polarization, the phenomena of mental influence in its manifested phases shows us that the principle may extend so that it is to embrace the phenomena of the influence of one mind over that of another, of which so much has been written on tally of late years. When it is understood that mental induction is possible, that is, that mental states may be produced by induction from others, then we can readily see how a certain rate of vibration or polarization of a certain mental state may be communicated to another person, and his plurality in that state of mental states is thus changed." End quote. This is perhaps very intuitive even for those who are not aware of Hermeticism, and can be seen in the effects of politicians and other people of all time. The orator changes the tone of his speech, or the politician changes the tone of his speech, and so the mental state to convey a certain emotion. So long as the emotional state of the audience is already resonated with his speech, they can be swung emotionally by his or her favor. Likewise, presenters can produce similar effects in their audiences based on subtle appeals to emotion throughout. Of course, this is obvious and goes without saying, however, that it is worthwhile to note that this works at a deeper collective unconscious level as well. Enough people being swayed in a certain way will produce an unconscious resonance between them, the tone of which can be picked up by others. These others would then be more emotionally susceptible to the resonance simply because of its presence in the collective unconscious. Finally, there is the issue of plurality being related to the resolution of paradoxes in the Kybalion. Quote, "Man has always recognized something akin to this principle, and has endeavored to express it by such saying maxims and the following: everything is and isn't at the same time, all truths are but half-truths, every truth is but false, there are two sides to everything, there is a reverse side to every shield, etc., etc. The Hermetic teachings are that the effect of the difference between these things seemingly diametrically opposed to each other is merely a matter of degree. It teaches that the pairs of opposites may be reconciled, and that the thesis and antithesis are identical in nature but different in degree, and that the universal recognition of opposites is effected by the recognition of this principle of plurality." End quote. This follows naturally from plurality if we recognize that a paradox and likewise its resolution are among other things like mental states. For example, even earlier in the series, the viewer was introduced to seamlessly different and conflicting concept in world religions, and as it relates to both the afterlife and the fallen state. Prior to watching these videos, the viewer may have had a mental state wherein he or she thought that they were mutually exclusive and incompatible with ideas in religion. Naturally, this mental state would have a vibration. I should also want to point out that viewers may have had the concept that science and the supernatural are incompatible with each other. However, if you have watched this series, you can see why this is not the case. Likewise, upon learning this new knowledge, the viewer may have had another different mental state wherein he or she was aware of how these apparently different descriptions of the fallen state were in fact analogous to blind man disagreeing over the correct description of an elephant. This different mental state would have yet another description of, or a different vibration as well. Thus, as the vibration was changed, in this case the increase in understanding, the paradox became resolved as well. The ultimate point of bringing this up here is that there are no true paradoxes. Excluding what was deliberate lies, no actual contradiction can exist within the mind of the all. God is truth manifest, and all is one. Truth underlies logic through and does not contradict itself. Thus, in reality, there are no true paradoxes, only the one truth seen in part by finite minds as though it were a different dark mirror. Now, for the script of this video and many other concepts in this series, you can check out the Quantum Hermetica, where you will find more details regarding the Hermetic principles,